Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Hardware Podcast. My name's Jackson Danner alongside my best man Omar Borja. Today we are going to be briefly reviewing what happened in the previous week's college football action and then are previewing week 6, which is hard to believe we're already saying that considering there's really only 14 regular season weeks. We're almost halfway through, unfortunately. So, man, how you doing, Omar? Doing all right?
Doing good. I'm busy, but I'm glad I get to do the day off that I love where, the RB's great and they give you 4-day weekends like this, which I'm using accordingly to produce content rather than rest because a Borja never quits and apparently a Borja never sleeps. So that being said, I'm just enjoying this college football season, been able to get to a few games. I know last week, or I guess a couple weeks ago, I saw UTEP play UNLV. And then I got to see my brother play for the first time. So, a lot of football, a lot of good football. And then actually I did post actually. I don't think I posted. I did post that I drove the hour from work just to catch the second half in New Mexico State versus Florida International on a Wednesday night. So I'll consider myself the biggest Conference USA fan in the Army. But that being said, just doing well.
Omar, I don't think you have that much competition for that title. So you're probably correct. So
So yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. We'll talk about that later. It's funny because there is a Sam Houston State fan that I talk about. His name's Drew, who is an Army veteran. So it's like kind of interesting. I guess there are some Army ties. I guess in my social media circle that are military and Conference USA crossovers. Where I just live in El Paso and I just have two teams within an hour away. That's just my ties to the conference.
hey, good enough. So um yeah, man. Well, hey, we will go ahead and start on a couple of we'll talk some Heisman because it's still kind of a little too early to talk positional awards. We'll probably wait until a little bit closer to November at least to try and
Want to
get
talk about
in,
the biggest
do a
news
deep
of the
dive on
day?
those. So
You want to talk
what's
about the
up?
biggest news of yesterday? Like, I know we talked about it before, like the biggest news of yesterday, like the news bomb that dropped yesterday.
Go for it.
I guess before we do, sorry to preempt you, Jackson, but yeah, like, this was probably the biggest news story of, I guess the football day, maybe college football, maybe pro, but Phil Jurkovec a day after like, being benched at Pitt, just announced that he was going to play tight end to close out his the last 6 games of his college career, and like this came out of nowhere. To be honest, like yes, I made an Impractical Jokers joke about it where it's like in quotes, "Hey Phil, now say you're going to play tight end," with like the Jokers laughing. But all jokes aside, I'm kind of hurt by this because no one was more dedicated to the Phil Jurkovec Heisman hype train than me and my good friend John Glowatz of our Northeast podcast notoriety. But we rode the Phil Jurkovec Heisman train. Like we both thought I thought he'd at least be a finalist in 2021 after 2020. Then he got hurt and I'm like, okay, he'll be back 2022. But I believe Phil Jurkovec is a Mackey Award front runner now. I still believe in Phil Jurkovec. I believe that Phil Jurkovec will lead Pitt to the Pinstripe Bowl. Well, not the Pinstripe Bowl. They already play Yankee Stadium. I believe Jurkovec will lead Pitt to the Military Bowl, and he will right the ship for the Pitt Panthers. Because I still believe in Phil Jurkovec, and I still believe in Santa Claus. I still believe in the Tooth Fairy.
I believe before the show you told me you believe that he's the next Travis Kelce. It's Kels, by the way, not Kelsey. But man, are you still on that hype train once he gets to the
Yeah,
next
I
level?
believe so. I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, but I'll go one step higher, and I think that Phil Jurkovec will end up dating Selena Gomez. When it's
Wow,
all said
that
and
is
done.
the
I,
hottest take of all. Not just him
I
winning.
think when
I
it's
mean,
all said and
as
done, I
if
think
the
Phil
military
Jurkovec
bowl
dates.
wasn't good enough, dating Selena Gomez after that.
Yeah, Phil Jurkovec will date Selena Gomez after winning the Mackey Award and then getting drafted in the middle rounds as a tight end. I think he'll be asleep. He'll be kind of like a Taysom Hill kind of player in the pros, after winning the Mackey Award. So
Sure.
it's okay. The Phil Jurkovec hype train hasn't derailed yet. We still got plenty of fuel and we still got conductors. That's all I gotta say.
You got conductors and fuel, and that's all you need. So Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I guess we can go on to like the actual content of the pod. I just wanted to say
Maybe
that.
it hasn't derailed, but with this position change, just the track has switched. That's it. They,
Okay, he's going to a different station. That's all. Yeah, the
yeah,
track is switched,
there you
Jackson.
go.
I like that. I like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Okay, well, we've already gotten way off topic. We'll go ahead and try and underail at least the podcast. Let's talk about we'll just quickly run through some names and talk about maybe some Heisman moments and if they've happened thus far and some arguments for one player versus another, because that's truly the only time that you pit two quarterbacks against each other is the Heisman on any game. So first name Brock Bowers. Omar, I'll get your thoughts first. For being a tight end, which a tight end hasn't won the Heisman in a long time. Do you think Brock Bowers has had a Heisman moment yet, or something to define him? Maybe a highlight that can be played in New York City.
Yeah, so I think Brock Bowers had like a Heisman moment last week against Auburn of all schools. I think that speaks more about Georgia as a team this year than Brock Bowers as a player. But Brock Bowers' name was getting thrown around like as a Heisman candidate last year, and a little bit of history on tight ends in the Heisman. So Leon Hall is the only tight end. Well, he was a split end, but in 1949, teams didn't really use wide receivers. So for he's the only tight end to win Heisman. Leon Hall in 1948, actually. I'm sorry, not 49. And then Ken McAfee before Kyle Pitts got Heisman votes in 2020. Ken McAfee was the only tight end from 1977 to 2019 to be in the top 10 of the Heisman. A great Notre Dame tight end in Ken McAfee, that is. So a little bit of it's like it for not I was about to say Leon Hart for Brock Bowers to win the Heisman, it would be a essentially generational thing to happen. Like it truly would. There is no doubt about it. And it was a 1949 Heisman. My mistake for Leon Hart. But I think so. The thing is like it just depends on the voters. It just depends if the voters because everyone's saying Caleb Williams is the front runner. Same with Michael Penix. You know, if Caleb Williams is the best player in the country, I kind of wonder if the writers would preserve the sanctity of the Heisman. Not that having a two-time winner would corrupt it, but it's like it's almost unprecedented. We haven't seen this since Archie Griffin. So that's something we'll talk about later on. But I guess if worst came to worst, if like Michael Penix got hurt, or if Washington lost a couple games and Penix just really did not look good, I think we can see Brock Bowers in New York possibly. In the same way we saw Aiden Hutchinson end up sneaking there in 2021. So that's my thoughts. But
I
yeah, he
forgot
has a Heisman
Hutchinson was
moment.
a finalist. Honestly,
Yeah, and not Will Anderson. That was a travesty. That's one of the only times you'll see me defend anything involving the SEC. 2021 was a travesty. If Hutchinson was there, Will Anderson should have been there. But
yeah.
that's another discussion. But yeah, I think Bowers definitely had a Heisman moment, but a lot has to happen, I think, for him to win it.
Yeah, I think a lot has to happen. I think if he is going to win it or even be a finalist, his Heisman moment is yet to happen. And don't get me wrong, he was spectacular in that Auburn game. Georgia really did target him late in that game, and he's a player that really hasn't gotten as many targets as he probably really deserves yet. So I mean, yes, him being the star late in that Auburn game is good. It's not a Heisman winning moment for a tight end. I will say, with no bias at all, I am kind of sick of these Kyle Pitts comparisons, though. He's definitely not any Kyle Pitts. Pitts had 7 touchdowns in his first 3 games in his Heisman year, our Heisman voting year. So Brock Bowers has not had 7 touchdowns this year, in case you didn't or you weren't familiar with the stat sheet. So, but Brock Bowers, excellent tight end, definitely the best tight end in football, but definitely not definitely not a Heisman worthy player quite yet. So
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, but I think it's funny because when Chase Young was a finalist in 2019, people say like I don't know if you told me what NFL scout said about like if people watch all 22s and Chase Young win the Heisman. I think you brought
that
that to
was
my
Jim
attention.
Nagy. Jim Nagy.
Yeah, okay, Jim Nagy said that, right? So it's like I feel like it's like that type of thing where it's like Brock Bowers in almost every game he plays is the best player on the field. Um, but it's like the Heisman isn't the Heisman, it's sadly not the best player in America. It's the best player on the best team playing the most optimal position for stat padding. So it's
You're
sad, but that's
absolutely
just the way
correct.
it is.
And I mean, our podcast is based on college football wars, right? And that's why I think it's a good dynamic because you definitely follow. You're very more privy to a lot of the storylines than I am for sure, and I at least have some semblance of access to college football all 22. So that that's why this thing works. Um, but yeah, we can go ahead. We'll move on to our next player. We'll do Audric Estime, the running back from Notre Dame. Omar, I'll let you take the lead on this one.
Oh, Audrey Estime. I mean, I wouldn't say, excuse me, geez, got early morning congestion, but don't sleep on Audric Estime, I think, in my opinion, because he averages 100 yards per game as it is right now. And the thing is like I feel like Notre Dame's kind of saving his workload for like much tougher games like the USC game in a couple weeks in games like that. But he only has 98 carries in 6 games with 672 yards right now, halfway through the season. So he's on pace for 1,200 yards, and I'd say he's on pace for more considering how Sam Hartman played against Duke last week. Not bad, but not like the Sam Hartman breakout stats we became accustomed to at Wake Forest. Estimated Heisman moment with his game winning touchdown run against Duke in the final minute. Very electrifying run. And my thing with Estime is Notre Dame for the first time since I'd say the 2012 season is must watch television because they're gonna play in like from the Ohio State game to the USC game. That is 4 straight primetime games on network TV. Like they get 2 straight Saturday night football appearances. And if you think about the amount of programs that has happened to, I can't remember the last time it's happened one. And if it has happened, I can't name those programs off the top of my head. Like there's a few programs like they wouldn't even do that for like Michigan or Ohio State. Put them
Uh,
on SNF for back to back weeks.
I believe, did it not happen to Clemson last year? I believe with Boston College for the red bandana game in Florida
Yes,
State. I could be off on that, but I feel like they had that. I
that's a
could be
good
wrong
point.
though.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Clemson. It's rare. It still is rare. I'm just that's my recollection of it. But
yeah,
I'm
I'm
gonna
looking
look
at
it up
that
now.
too. But yeah, but okay, but 4 straight primetime network TV games. I mean, all on different networks. I'll buy it. That is extremely rare. Like a night game, and you are correct about that one. Yeah, they did have. Well, they had Saturday Night Football for 3 straight weeks. So that okay. So I stand corrected. Then
It
I'm
wasn't
willing to
for
admit I'm
oh
wrong.
yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, they had 3 straight weeks. They had NC State, Boston College, and Florida State. So I stand corrected with that. That being said, though, Notre Dame really, with their NBC, like they have their games on NBC and whatnot, but it's like, they haven't had a stretch where it's like 4 straight primetime games and like 2 straight on ABC. But so the thing with Estimate too, I just think Sam Hartman overshadowed him for so long throughout this year with how great he played, but Hartman kind of struggled a little bit against Duke. And then Estime being the guy that was kind of like the face of that comeback victory over Notre Dame with like that touchdown. And even though Hartman converted that 4th and 16, I think that was huge for his Heisman. And so like I think he's in the same position as Brock Bowers, but like he's in a little bit of a better position than Brock Bowers because it's easier for a running back to win the Heisman than a tight end. But
Absolutely.
I just think Notre Dame is rightfully saving Estime for more important games, and the USC game could definitely cement him as a front runner because they've got Caleb Williams. If Notre Dame shuts down Caleb Williams and then Estime gets 30 carries and like 150 yards, then I think we got a Kenneth Walker situation where a running back's a front runner for the Heisman heading into November.
So I have a few thoughts on this one that I'll try and set apart and separate because they're not necessarily related, but they are all relevant. For a running back to win the Heisman, you do need to be like a Reggie Bush or Derrick Henry level player. I don't believe Audric Estime is that. He's good. He's not Derrick Henry. He's not Reggie Bush. Audric Estime needs Duke to be very good for the rest of the year because really, when was the last? I would probably date it back to Lamar Jackson doing the hurdle versus Syracuse was the last time we saw a definitive Heisman moment be against a not great team. And if Duke pulled the one-off upset versus Clemson and is Duke football brand for the rest of the year, then it's going to be tough to make that the Heisman moment for a running back, especially, right? So you need Duke to essentially win out for the rest of the year for the most part. I will say, as my last thing, this isn't necessarily as a Heisman moment, but it does make me a little bit more affectionate to him. He had a few really good receptions in that Duke game, and my catchphrase, courtesy of Maurice Jones-Drew, if you can't catch, you can't play, as a running back, right? So 4 receptions versus Duke on the road is pretty good. So. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Audric Estime.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been a big Audrey Estime fan since last year, since he came on the scene last year. But yeah, like he's not Reggie Bush, but that gold helmet gets you a long way. I'll just say that
It
that
does.
gold helmet, it's so much so where it's like, Notre Dame. I just love when Notre Dame means a lot to college football. Like when they get stretches like this one on primetime TV for 4 straight games, because love them or hate them, they're Notre Dame and they're important to college football. Like it's okay if you think they're a heel. That is totally okay with me. As a Notre Dame supporter, I wouldn't say like I'm a huge fan, but like I support Notre Dame and I respect them. But love them or hate them, like they make people watch college football for sure. So I guess that
When
wraps the ball on that one.
yeah, when all 21 of their starters are on the field, you support them. So
Wow, that's going to be the funniest running joke since like back in I think 1950, I think 57 or something. Notre Dame actually employed a tactic. It was like the late 50s. They employed a tactic like where they would have a player fake an injury, or get injured before the end of the half to like get another play, and they got a touchdown that way. So the next week the press called them the fainting Irish. Um, so I think that 21 player joke will definitely be. And I was telling my brother because David is a big Ohio State fan. I told him about Coach Freeman, which I love Coach Freeman. Coach Freeman could be a Hollywood A-list actor, man. Just gotta say that, man, with those looks. But he said that he thought he would get a flag if he put another player in the field. I'm like, that just reminds me of the kid that doesn't speak up in class because he thinks he's going to get in trouble when like he has a legitimate concern. Like that's just like I'm like, dude, dude, like
same
I
feeling.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
flabbergasted at that. I'm like, come on, coach. Like what the heck, man. But I guess it's a good time to I'll let you have like the first say with the JJ McCarthy Heisman train, which like I like Michigan. So like Michigan's brand of football kind of reminds me now of the Bo Schembechler days back in like the 70s, 80s, and 90s with Michigan, where like Michigan didn't produce a Heisman winner, but they played good defense and they ran the ball very well. They were like pretty much the prototypical Big Ten team. And they're kind of getting back to that, where it's like JJ McCarthy, he's a good quarterback, but it's like JJ McCarthy isn't willing teams to games like Michael Penix was in 2020 for Indiana, or like CJ Stroud was, or like Justin Fields was. So I know people want to kind of push the JJ McCarthy Heisman train. If you ask me, I think that Talia is the best quarterback in the Big Ten. Full stop. But I guess your thoughts on the JJ McCarthy Heisman train.
So I will say on JJ McCarthy, this is to no fault of his own, but Michigan is going to be they're a good team. They're ranked number 2 in the country right now. Right now, that is for the AP. That's not for the college football playoff poll. But regardless, number 2 in the country. Let's look at their schedule, right? Because I don't think JJ McCarthy has had a definitive Heisman moment, and nor should he. They've won every game this year by multiple scores. There's not really a game that should have been close either, so that's not really any to their credit. But they have at Minnesota, they have Indiana at home, at Michigan State. We all know what's going on there. That's not going to be the usual rivalry that it is. Purdue at home, on the road at Penn State in a noon slot in early November. That's probably going to be obviously one of his bigger moments. If he can win there, I think his Heisman moment would have to come from at Penn State. Then you have at Maryland and Michigan at home. Against Ohio State. I think Michigan should. This is like the first year in a while that I would expect Michigan to take care of Ohio State, take care of business against them. Something could change by late November, but that's just my opinion. So I think if he has a Heisman moment, it's going to come against Penn State in on November 11th. He hasn't had one yet. He's not. I'm not going to act like I've seen like all the film on him or anything like that because I haven't. But his stat sheet, which is unfortunately what these things are voted off of all too often, is not flashy either. So I wouldn't be shocked if he's a Heisman finalist. I wouldn't be shocked if he isn't by the end of the year. So and if I was given a vote, I would just say right now I'm not informed enough to be able to turn a voting form in. So so we'll see. He's one of my on my list for sure to kind of watch a little bit more of, but because right now I've just seen what the common folk have seen, like, and I'm no different, where I've just seen, caught a little bit here, caught a little bit there, but no one's really, unless you're a Michigan fan, no one's really been watching Michigan football that closely because, with all due respect to, East Carolina and Bowling Green and Rutgers, it's just not,
UNLV too, and UNLV is
yeah,
probably the best
not
one they've
really
had all
primetime
year.
games right now. So,
I mean, UNLV, that's probably their best. If we're being real, that's probably the best resume win right now because UNLV is they got a Power Five non-conference when they're 4-1 in the Mountain West. Like, I mean
yeah,
that's actually like it'll be funny if like that ends up being like the
if
resume
that
for
ends up
Michigan.
being, oh, of course, Penn State, Ohio State, and UNLV, the three best wins of the year. Yeah.
I remember back in 2018 with like the debate. Like I remember seeing it was like Oklahoma versus Ohio State in the debate for like who should take the final playoff spot. Army crept up as a signature win, which like I was like as an Army fan, I'm like, man, we have made it. I mean, yeah, that was our yearling year, that 2018 year. So, yeah, I mean, I do agree with the JJ McCarthy. It's like the thing is, it's like I feel like it's more likely for a running back to win the Heisman out of Michigan than a quarterback. Because had Blake Corum not gotten hurt, I still firmly believe that he would have won the Heisman last year. And
Yeah.
I think that's just the trend for a lot of Big Ten schools. Like you look at Kenneth Walker in 2021, you can pull up our old like podcast footage, and like we were going crazy over Kenneth Walker. And like he had his Heisman moment against Michigan too. So it's like I feel like if like for a lot of schools, like it's in the Big Ten, just with the way that conference is, it's more likely. I mean, he does have some like big TV spots where like the country will be tuning in. Like I know this weekend, big Saturday night with the cool theme song, man. That song stays in my head 24/7. They got Minnesota on primetime on NBC, so that could draw a lot of eyes. I mean, 2.17 million people watched Iowa Michigan State, a game that had no implications on NBC. So it's like for Michigan, like that may be the second most highest second highest viewed game of the slot and maybe the weekend, to be honest with you. I don't know.
So one thing, Michigan is not in really their schedule until Penn State or Ohio State. They don't really have an excuse to, but I don't think JJ McCarthy is going to be able. I'm not going to say that. That's a bold statement this early on. I'm questioning his ability if they would be able to come back from a substantial deficit to come back from victory, only because JJ McCarthy he's had 9 touchdowns in 82 attempts, or in 80 attempts in play action. And he's had 12 touchdowns, and 4 of his 5 interceptions have come with no play action in 277 attempts. So he is definitely one of the more reliant quarterbacks on play action. So I think if you take that threat away, then he's at best unproven. So I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying he hasn't been given the opportunity to perform under that circumstance. So we'll see if he can. Hopefully Michigan does their job and they won't have to. But I just think that's a little interesting tidbit, at least.
That is true. I mean, and the fact that Michigan can win games without like a flashy quarterback really is a testament to like their type of team. So kudos to Jim Harbaugh. I guess I want to do like a brief audible, I guess, really quick. Do you think if Maryland beats Ohio State this week, you think Talia is a Heisman front runner? He puts up numbers. That Maryland's team puts up
Um,
numbers.
no, not a Heisman front runner, but in the conversation at least, because like you said, this was an audible where we didn't have him on our list until you said that. So I think he's talked about at least.
Oh, I definitely think that that the path is there. Like the path definitely is there for Maryland because they got Penn State, they got Michigan, they got
Yeah.
Ohio State.
Oh, the
So
path
I'm
is there.
excited to
It's
see.
just can they win those games? So yeah,
They came close the
absolutely.
past couple years. They have come close the past couple years to beating Michigan, Ohio State. I think Penn State was not so much, but Penn State's on the lower end of the totem pole, those three schools. But I definitely think it's possible for them.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
mean, I guess
We'll quickly go over Mike Penix versus Caleb Williams in that argument. Just the two Pac-12 quarterbacks that are really probably front running for the Heisman from that. So my argument for that, unfortunately, this is the Heisman is more a popularity contest than anything else. Who has the name brand right now? The Heisman winner, USC, who's the flashy, fun team with Will Ferrell in attendance at their games. So I think Caleb Williams, if it's on an even playing field and they're both equal quarterbacks, and Caleb Williams is going to get the edge only because that's been the conversation the entire year. And ESPN's promo for the song of the what do they call it? Like the song that they choose to use for all of their bumper music and their commercials for Saturday Night Football. It's the one by Post Malone, I think. They even in that the only mention of the Heisman or of college football awards was can can Caleb Williams retain the Heisman, essentially is what it was. So that's been the storyline all year long. And so I think he's automatically given an edge. But Mike Penix, man, is playing very good football, and Washington has probably the second best argument to be the number one overall team in the country. So I like Penix a lot. Obviously, we've talked about him for a long time. So you know how I feel about that conversation. But
yeah, I mean, so I think I know we talked earlier about the sanctity of like the Heisman because it hasn't been done a back-to-back winner since Archie Griffin in the 70s. So I tend to think that because with Lamar was a finalist. We think about all the guys that like were finalists again. They they didn't win. And like Lamar, I think was arguably better in 2017. That's one that comes off the top of my head. In 2017, Lamar Jackson was arguably better than he was in 2016 statistically, but they didn't give him the Heisman. Same thing for like I mean Johnny Manziel didn't win it, again after being a finalist. Same like Jameis Winston and whatnot. So I mean I kind of think that the Heisman if they're because Penix so far has better stats than Caleb Williams. He has 2,000 yards I think through 5 games, close to 2,000 through 5 games. So he's on pace for probably like 4,400, led the nation in passing last year, and they're gonna play each other. They make no doubt about it. Like one of them is gonna come on top and come out. One of them's gonna come out on top. Uh, sorry, that came out wrong. One of them's gonna come out on top on that game. So that's gonna be an easy eliminator. But another name I'd watch out for too, because like it's just funny because like when you have like a trio of teams that play each other, like all those teams could realistically go 1-1 against each other. And like Bo Nix can enter the chat, enter the conversation. Like if they end up beating Washington, so I think again, like I feel like there's not much talk for the Heisman right now. It's still like too early, but of course it's the point of our podcast. But it's like, I think the winner will come out of Pac-12. I really think that that stretch of like 3 games will decide a winner between Oregon, Washington, USC. Unless one of them loses earlier, then
yeah, yeah, a lot going on in this Heisman race. So
we forgot
um
our HBCU players. So we got to get to that.
yeah, let's go ahead. Do you want to move on to our HBCU player of the week from last
Yeah.
week? And then do you have an offense and defense for sorry. I would say live television, but it's not. So we can do one player on each side of the ball from last week and then an HBCU player on top of that. But we'll start off with HBCU player of the week if you want to kick us off with that.
Yeah, sure. I'll start us off with my player. So I got from the Howard Bison. I got Ian Wheeler. Ian Wheeler did darn near everything for Howard against Robert Morris. Now, yes, it was Robert Morris. Robert Morris has struggled, but if you look at his stat sheet, like he did a huge amount of work in limited touches. He had one kick return, but that kick return went for 88-yard touchdown against the Colonials. He had 4 carries for 81 yards, over 20 yards per carry for Howard, and 2 catches for 45 yards. So that's over 200 all-purpose yards on 7 touches. Very electrifying. Wheeler is a guy that, I think with a lot of these backs, you want guys that can return kicks, that can make themselves versatile. Like you say, you can't catch, you can't play. Because a lot of guys start off on special teams, covering kicks, but a kick return threat like Wheeler, and Wheeler has proven himself to be one of the best kick returners in the MEAC. Definitely a huge player to watch for Howard. And Howard plays Northwestern this weekend. Honestly, that's kind of that's a trendy upset pick for me, honestly, because Quentin Williams' experience. They played USF pretty competitively this year. And then Northwestern has like their array of problems. I don't think much of the Northwestern fan base is even going to show up to Ryan Field. There is a thriving Black community in Chicago. There's a lot of Howard graduates. So this could end up being a de facto Howard home game at Ryan Field. And how embarrassing would that be for the Northwestern program to be outdrawn by Howard at your own crib? But that being said, Ian Wheeler, him and Quentin Williams. Quentin Williams is an efficient 13 to 16 for 170 yards. So it was very tough. Quentin Williams might find his way into the Shrine game with your player of the week, the East West Shrine game, with your player of the week, but at quarterback. But yeah, so the Howard Bison, the MEAC is alive and well. I mean, the conference season has hardly kicked off yet for that conference. I'm excited to just hop into it.
Yeah, no, the MEAC is alive and well, as you'll see in my HBCU player of the week. I'm gonna go with probably one of the more obvious ones, Davius Richard, the quarterback from North Carolina Central. Man, in a 21-point overtime comeback win versus Campbell last week, he went 21 for 34, 265 yards, a passing touchdown, but really the main portion of the performance was 86 rush yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. In that game, he also set NC Central's school record for most career rushing touchdowns, which was pretty cool, of all games to do it in. He did it in one that had as much drama as it did. Man, he is toweringly athletic. Garners a lot of respect in the run game, and he's decisive in the passing game. Nearly unstoppable in the short yardage QB power scenario. So he throws his receivers open better than a lot of quarterbacks we see this draft cycle. Like he really had some really excellent touch on a lot of these balls they throw. So and his highlight reel, he looks like if Cam Newton was 6'2" and some change. Like he really has a very physical dynamic to his game that's very, very impressive. I'll also point out, obviously, I'm not discovering him. I'm not alone in this thought. He was one of the first 2 players to be named to the HBCU Legacy Bowl on NFL Network in February 2024. So obviously one of the better HBCU players out there. And man, he is if he keeps doing what he's doing, and especially in the passing game, I'm not going to say I'd like to see improvement, just consistency. And I think he can be talked about as a legitimate NFL, like a later round prospect for sure, to be, worthy of draft consideration. So man, big Davius Richard fan from here on out. So.
Yeah, I mean, Davis Richard is amazing, honestly. I definitely think he's a Walter Payton front runner, for
Yeah.
sure. Like North Carolina Central. Like my thing is too, I'm gonna go on a brief soapbox here because I'm upset because yes, Shador Sanders is great, but where's the love for the quarterbacks that outplayed him in the Celebration Bowl? Like, did the whole country,
Yeah.
saw those games. The whole country saw Corey Fields outplay Shador Sanders in 2021. The whole country saw Davis Richard and North Carolina Central put up 1,000,000 points on Jackson State in last year's Celebration Bowl. So it's like, where is the love for these HBCU quarterbacks? Because there is just so much. It's like they weren't, people only kind of knew about Shador Sanders at Jackson State, but there is like no love for guys like a Queel Glass. There is no love for guys like Davius Richard. There's no love for the Quinn Williams in Black college football. I mean, it's annoying. It's frustrating. Even a guy like Corey Zealous at Hampton, who's having a nice year, no one's talking about him. It's just annoying that the amount of talent that comes from HBCUs, at quarterback just gets overlooked, So I'm kind of heated. I'm a big Davis Richard fan, which is why I was hurt that North Carolina Central kind of they didn't show out against UCLA. I was expecting like them to drop 20 points at least, but 59-7. Bit disappointing, but it not counting that against them. But I will say their backup quarterback for schools in the FCS and the MEAC, like it does not get any easier for them because Walker Harris started in Richard's place in the Circle City Classic in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil, and he threw for 5 touchdowns, no picks, and I think that's more touchdowns than Anthony Richardson's going to throw at Lucas Oil all year. So the
For
best quarterback
reference,
performance
Anthony
that we'll see.
Richardson already has 3 at home this year.
I don't think he can
So
get 2 more. I don't think he can get 2 more, Jackson. That's just my opinion. That's probably the best quarterback play we'll see at Lucas Oil all year.
Omar noted
Walker Harris.
Anthony Richardson hater. So
No. I'm just doing that because I know I'm an instigator. I know I'll get a reaction out of you by insulting, by roasting anything with Florida.
cold.
I'm pretty sure SMU when they played Charlotte, they got more viewers than when Florida played Charlotte. I'm pretty sure because 18,000 people watch SMU versus Charlotte. I don't think that many people watch Florida versus Charlotte, to be honest with
Well,
you.
you know what? I had for that Florida versus Charlotte game, I was 2 of those viewers because I had 2 TVs on it at the same time. So man, but hey, you got to do one on a slight tape delay so you can see your own replays because they put their C team on these games. So
That is true. So I guess yeah, we can go very briefly to our players of the week before we our top performances of the week before we go on to our games of the week. So Jackson, I'll let you start because I mean
yeah, so I'll
you're the
go
guy with
ahead.
that.
I'll go ahead. I'll start off with my top offensive performer of the week last week. I'm gonna go with the transfer quarterback Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback obviously from Oklahoma. I want to talk about not necessarily last week as much as I want to talk about just his season on the whole. He's at a 75% completion percentage so far this year, almost 1,600 yards, 15 touchdowns, and another 4 on the ground. He has 4 receivers with multiple touchdowns too, which is something I always look at. If it's just one receiver that he's really targeting a lot, if a team takes him away, they're done. But no, he has a very solid receiving core that he's spreading the ball around too. Beyond first glance, Dylan and Tua Tagovailoa have a lot more in common than being lefty QBs from Hawaii. So they're both being just really efficient. Obviously, Dylan's going to be up for more of a challenge this week, versus Texas and the Red River rivalry. Their least decisive victory this year was still by a 14-point margin. So they haven't really, like Michigan, haven't really been tested that much all year. I will say about Dylan, throws the ball phenomenally inside the numbers. 12 of his 15 touchdowns have been completed inside the numbers. And statistically, he actually throws better when he's blitzed as opposed to when he's not. So if I were Texas, at least, kind of sit back, defend the inside, play a top hat defense where you cover the flats and really in between the numbers and force them to read the defense. If you can get pressure with 4, that's perfect. I think this Texas defense will help us find out a lot about Dylan Gabriel's abilities. So that said, I like the jump that he's made in his second year at Oklahoma as opposed to last year. And I think a lot of good things will come from this game from him. So I'm just excited to see what kind of defense Texas plays against him. So
Yeah, I mean Dylan Gabriel, definitely a great year under the radar. And if he can beat Texas, I would put him in the Heisman conversation as well. I
yeah,
mean, a lot of people forget
yeah.
about Quinn Ewers and excuse me, and Dylan Gabriel. But I'm gonna go on the complete opposite spectrum for my offensive player. So I'm gonna go with Zach Larrier out of the Air Force Academy because Air Force is having a great year. I wouldn't say it's under the radar, but like they're kind of becoming now a dark horse contender. I wouldn't say dark horse, but a front runner for the New Year's Six. And I think that let's say I think realistically, I don't think any team out of the Sun Belt is going to end up being undefeated, to be honest with you, because Sun Belt is just that good. Like especially the Sun Belt East with like James Madison, Marshall. Georgia Southern, Georgia State. Like there are just so many great teams in that conference. So Air Force right now is 5-0 for the first time since 2003. And Zach Larrier had an absolutely efficient game throwing the ball. He went 6 for 7, 189 yards, and then he had 8 carries for 103 yards on San Diego State, which like also begs the question, what happened to San Diego State? Like this is not the San Diego State that we are accustomed to. Not playing defense, not running the ball well, losing 49-10. Um, I mean, San Diego State might be in trouble. Brady Hoke might be on the hot seat, and yeah, just looking at it too, like the run game, 105 yards on 30 carries. Like they're not recruiting great talent running the ball and with offensive line. But Zach Larrier, just had an absolutely like great and efficient game. So for the Air Force Academy, so definitely a player to watch, and Air Force is a team to watch too. For the New Year's Six conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've talked a lot this year as far as Air Force and the New Year's Six conversation, and how they're definitely not the name brand group of five school that these bowl games typically look at the most. But you know what, with Cincinnati and a lot of these teams moving on to the Power Five, it definitely opens up the door for a lot of these other group of five schools, and Air Force is definitely one of them. So Boise State obviously being out of the conversation in the Mountain West as far as the New Year's Six competition, definitely helps their case, because if there's a couple good teams from the Mountain West and Boise State is one of them, they're gonna get the default pretty much. So yeah, it's cool to see, man. I was actually just in Colorado, and I got some targeted ads for Air Force football, and apparently done some renovations to their stadium since I was out there last. So pretty cool.
They are. That's why Air Force Army's at. I'm about to call it Mile High. I don't even know what sponsorship their stadium has right now. Empower Field. It's gonna be at Empower Field this year because of those renovations. So um so yeah. But going on to, I don't know if you have another defensive player of the week. You just want to go on to games of the week.
I do have one defensive player of the week from last week. I'm gonna go with Easton Mascarenas Arnold, the linebacker from Oregon State. Had a sack and a pick versus Utah where they beat the Utes by 2 touchdowns, which was a surprise to a lot of us. It was his second interception of the year as a linebacker. I believe he's one of 3 Power 5 linebackers to claim that bragging right. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I found from the NCAA's website, at least. Your best recollection of him previous to this game is probably being the linebacker that had a pick six versus Mike Penix last year, and you could argue that that's why that game versus Washington was so close. Washington only won by 3 points. So the Beavers have Washington at home November 18th. If Oregon State keeps this trend up and Washington does what they're supposed to do, that's going to be maybe the most interesting matchup of on November 18th. So one last thing about Easton, lettered in track in high school as a linebacker, which fascinates me. It really speaks to his speed. I mean, every year it seems like we see strong safety and linebacker be more and more blended, but he's actually an inside linebacker, so which makes it even more fascinating. So
Yeah, so I think it's interesting too with Oregon State because Oregon State has very like has they have linebackers with unique talents. I know Jack Costello last year took snaps at quarterback the past couple years, and I know he scored a touchdown in the preseason for the Niners at fullback. I was excited to have him, but fullback's kind of a logjam, obviously with Kyle Juszczyk. But yeah, like Oregon State too. Oregon State, I feel like they're kind of like the countercultural program when it comes to that. I guess when it comes like them in Utah, when it comes to the Pac-12 style of play, because like they'll beat you on defense. They'll run the ball very well. And Jonathan Smith is just building something great there. So I just hope I mean I hope that Oregon State can figure out this conference thing in the future. And Oregon State and Washington State, and just because Jonathan Smith has Oregon State in the best run they've had in almost I think 60 years or so, close to it. So yeah, I mean, that being said, I guess I had just want to briefly mention my trio of defensive players, all from the same school, but I'm picking the trio from Southwest Minnesota State of Josie Hedenston, Avery Johnston, and Mark Person. All three of them had 3 sacks. All three of them had 2 sacks against Valparaiso, but Southwest Minnesota State came up short by 1 point against Valparaiso. The Beacons, Division II team, almost beat Valparaiso. So just want to shout out that performance. Southwest Minnesota State could be a problem. this year in their conference. So that being said, games of the week, Jackson, what's your first game of the week to watch?
My first game of the week to watch, I'm gonna go with Boston College on the road to Army. I quickly want to go over Boston College's road to bowl eligibility. Only because they haven't played in a bowl game since 2019 or won one since 2016. So, their games left on the schedule after Army at Georgia Tech versus UConn, on the road at Syracuse, Virginia Tech at home, and then on the road at Pitt and Miami at home. So I think three of those games are winnable, in Georgia Tech, UConn, and in Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
And you have to, obviously you have to get the six to win. So you really need to have this win versus Army, in my opinion. I think they'll get there. I don't know. We'll see. I know you're convinced otherwise of Mikey Stadium being sold out, which is when all 40,000 fans or whatever the capacity is shows up, obviously it's a scary place to play compared to, Death Valley or any of the other ones that they see on a regular basis. So I'm gonna go with my player to watch, kind of Lewis Bond, the receiver from there. He has 5 touchdowns and 23 receptions and 4 in the last 3 games. So obviously one of the higher performers of Syracuse, or excuse me, Boston College football. So 38,000 is the capacity of Yankee Stadium. So if all 38,000 fans show up and at least 4,000 of them acting like they really don't want to be there, yeah, that's a pretty intimidating environment. So
Well, Jackson, where your Martin Stadium jokes out in the Palouse? That stadium seats 32,000. Let's hear your jokes on that stadium. They seat 32,000. Is that not a tough place to play out there, Washington State?
oh, is the game in Washington State?
Oh no,
I
no, because your joke is centered. Your argument is centered on capacity. You're making fun of the capacity. Well, Martin Stadium seats 32,000. That's a tough place to play. Is that a Mickey Mouse stadium to you, or because it only seats
can't say
32,000?
anything. So no.
Exactly.
I just pointing out facts, Omar. I don't know what the issue is. So
No, you're creating a narrative. We all know you're creating a narrative, and that's the thing. So it's okay. That's straw men. Straw men are easy to knock down because they're made of straw. So that being said, who would it
listen,
like?
man, if Lewis Bond did something to you, just let me know. Like,
He didn't do
clearly
anything
a
to me.
sore subject.
I will say, who would have thought that we would have been watching Boston College Army for the receivers? Because Isaiah Alston, he was on the PFF Team of the Week during Week 2 after his performance against Delaware State. After 3 catches, 135 yards, and 2 touchdowns, he has 9 catches and 266 yards. And this Army scheme, I mean, they looked really effective in the first half against Syracuse before Syracuse really, I mean, took control of the game. But that's not a bad loss by any means for Army. And I'm not saying that as an Army fan. Like Syracuse legitimately is like a good. They're a good ACC program. Like, and it's just funny too that I mean, you mentioned the ACC schedule that they have ahead of them, where it's like a team like Boston College that almost lost to a Patriot League team, that lost to a 1-4 MAC team, still has a path to eligibility because of how horrible the ACC is and how much it lacks depth. It's just amazing to me because yeah, Virginia Tech's not good. Virginia, they just beat Virginia. Virginia's not good. Pitt is surprisingly not good. I mean, we'll give them a freebie this year. And then they got UConn. UConn, tough way to lose. I don't know if you saw that. They blew a 21-point lead. Then Utah State came back. Then they scored in the final 2 minutes. They got the ball back in under 2 minutes, and then they got a blocked extra point on their game tying touchdown. Brutal way to lose. Want to apologize to my friend Bobby for having experienced that. A big UConn fan. But going on to my first game of the week, I'm going the exact opposite spectrum. I'm going to go with tonight's game, Ivy League Friday night, and I want to thank the MLB Wildcard Series for just completely producing duds. Almost all of them, if not all of them, were sweeps. So ESPN had to fill TV spots. Excuse me, had to fill TV spots on ESPN2. So Cornell and Harvard will be on ESPN2. This is Cornell's first game on ESPN1, ESPN or ESPN2 since 1990 when they played Brown. Amazing. Back when the Ivy League had a TV contract, they had 5 games a year aired on ESPN back I think from 1980 to 1990, which I'm going to write about. I forget off this podcast, but you talk about a great quarterback battle. Jamison Wong, 716 passing yards, 182 rushing yards in 3 games. we have Charles DePrima, who has 300 rushing yards in 3 games, including 89 against my beloved Holy Cross Crusaders, which like Charles DePrima outplayed Matthew Sluka. As much as I hate to say it, he outplayed Matthew Sluka. But just great quarterbacks to watch. You know, Harvard has a strong run game, but they've just produced so many like running backs. Like Aaron Shamplin comes to mind. Aiden Bourget comes to mind as well. Shane McLaughlin is following that those footsteps with 330 yards in 3 games. So I'm excited for this one. ESPN2, 7 o'clock Eastern. I mean, this game could. I'm excited to see the ratings come out for this game because ESPN2 is way more accessible than ESPNU is. So 7 o'clock, be there, for Ivy League Friday night. You'll get some good quarterback play for the in this game.
I will say I have participated in Ivy League Friday nights more than I did last year. And they actually are very enjoyable. So it's fun, man. We got to get America behind this tradition of watching Ivy League football on Friday night. So
Last week's game was good. Last week, the Cornell
yeah.
or no Columbia versus Princeton. Because Princeton scored on a 4th and goal in the last 2 minutes. Like, very very good ending for that one.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm gonna go. I'll stay on brand and go with another Ivy League game to watch. Yale at Dartmouth. Yale won the conference last year and has already matched their loss total from last year, starting off with 1-2. Dartmouth finished next to last, but have won their last 2 games. Really, the main player I'll keep an eye on during this game, Dartmouth quarterback Nick Howard. He's had more rushing attempts and rushing touchdowns than passing attempts and passing touchdowns, respectively. So if Yale controls the run, I think they'll be fine. Because I think they probably are the better team at the end of the day, but it is going to be one of the more interesting ones to watch. I believe it's a 1:30 Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Eastern kick time on Saturday, if I remember correctly, on ESPN Plus. So a little Ivy League action to watch.
So I will say this about Nick Howard. Nick Howard's interesting because I just love the Dartmouth scheme. I saw Dartmouth play in 2019. I saw him play twice actually when they want to share the Ivy League where they played. I watched him play at Harvard Stadium. I watched him play Yankee Stadium against Princeton back when I was in college. But Dartmouth's system's pretty interesting because they run a 2 quarterback system. The late great Buddy Stevens loved his quarterback run game. So they always run 2 quarterbacks. Nick Howard just happens to be the quarterback that doesn't pass as well. The other quarterback that they have in Dylan Cadwaller is the other throwing quarterback. It's a pretty much the throwing quarterback, and he is 33 of 50 for 308 yards. Excuse me. While Howard, yeah, he's only thrown 30 passes, but Howard is there to run the ball. So it's interesting how that works because they make their 2 quarterback system work. They've won in the Ivy League. Buddy Stevens, the late great Buddy Stevens, won Ivy League titles with this system. And before it was Howard and Cadwaller, it was Derek Klein and Jared Gerbino. So it's like they're able to attract these tough quarterbacks because Nick Howard is not an easy guy to bring down, 6'2", 225. And on the flip side, Dylan Cadwaller only has six rushing attempts. So I think if you want to see a unique scheme, watch Dartmouth Yale just from the whole perspective of it, because there is a lot of orbit motion. They do a lot of empty backfields and wings out of the shotgun, and a lot of jet sweeps and quarterback runs. It's a fun system to watch for those that love the run game. So I'm glad you brought up Dartmouth, Jax. I do hope you watch that game. I mean I would love to hear your thoughts on the Dartmouth scheme if you do end up watching that one. Because it's interesting.
There's a chance because Florida doesn't play until 4. But I will be at work, unfortunately, for the majority of it. So I'll catch a little bit of it probably. So it helps that it's on ESPN Plus and doesn't contribute to the stream limit. So I will say that.
Exactly. Yeah. So definitely, yeah, that definitely is a great one to watch. I mean, Nick Howard, and like you look at Nick Howard's stats in 2021, 18 pass attempts, 138 yards, 124 rushing attempts at 800 yards. So, when Nick Howard's in the game, you know what Nick Howard's going to do, but he's still hard to stop. Uh, Going on, I'm going to stay with a non-scholarship program for my next game, but in a different conference. I'm going to go with the Pioneer Football League. Butler right now, who would have thought that Butler would be the favorite right now out of the Pioneer Football League? And the Pioneer Football League, to say the least, has been horrid this year. You had Davidson lose a Subdivision 1 game. You had a couple other programs struggle against Subdivision 1 teams. And you had San Diego State lost to a Subdivision 1 as well, I believe. Yeah, they lost in overtime to Subdivision One. So that conference is struggling all throughout. Butler is a crisp 2-0 in the conference, and they have one of the best running backs in the country. They have Jiron Mitchell, who has 670 yards in 5 games, and he has 57 carries in those last 2 weeks. So Butler really loves giving him the ball. He had 31 carries. I love any type of running back gets 30 carries in a game in this day and age. 31 carries last week. And then St. Thomas, the defending champion, I had them ranked in my FCS preseason poll because they went 10-1 last year. They've struggled, and Harvard ran for 255 yards against the Tommies. This is a huge game for Butler because in these next 2 weeks they have St. Thomas and Davidson. Both are undefeated. Both are undefeated in the Pioneer Football League. Yeah, both are undefeated in the Pioneer Football League, so that could determine the conference. And Butler could have their first playoff appearance since 2013. But Jiron Mitchell, if you love a running back, I think Jiron Mitchell will end up with more rushing yards than Anthony Richardson this year. I think he'll have the most rushing yards in the city of Indianapolis this year.
You know there's 17 games in the National Football League, right?
I mean, Mitchell's on pace for like 1,400 yards. I don't think Jonathan Taylor's reaching 1,400 yards. I think he might have the most rushing yards in the city of Indianapolis. Like I said, do you
Again,
legitimately think that
I'm
Jonathan
gotta just
Taylor?
I'll courtesy copy old ticks exposed on our freezing cold
Okay,
takes
I'm just saying
on this
1,400 yards is
podcast.
hard to
So
get these days.
yeah, we'll see. No, we won't.
Going on to your next game, Jackson.
I'll go with my last game of the week to watch. I'm gonna stay in the ACC field of play. Notre Dame at Louisville. The ACC obviously changed to no divisions, right? So it's really only the top two teams from the conference to make the conference championship. Louisville is sneakingly the only undefeated ACC team that's already played 3 conference games. And their next 3 are Notre Dame, obviously, and then at Pitt and versus Duke. Notre Dame is coming off maybe the most emotional 2 weeks you can have of a tough home loss versus, and then the next week, a difficult road win with College Game Day and attendance at both. So I think it's going to be interesting, at least. Louisville wide receiver Jamari Thrash already has 444 yards on the year. Give me Louisville in an upset in this one, man. I think Louisville is an interesting team. So I like them to pull this one off at home. I'll probably end up being wrong on that, but I think Notre Dame has been through a lot, and Louisville is bracing for the next 3 weeks that are going to be 3 difficult games. So
So I think it's interesting with Louisville, because they really haven't. They've had a couple games where like against lesser opponents they haven't looked great in. The Indiana game comes to mind, where they only beat Indiana, I think 21-14. In that one, they raced out to a 14 or 21 point lead at halftime, but the offense just kind of fizzled from there. And then NC State last week also comes to mind where like the offense struggled, but yeah, like this is the biggest game in the short series history of the Notre Dame Louisville series. They've only played I think 3 times. But this will be fun to watch, and like I said, Notre Dame's must see TV. Like again, it's just great. Going on to my next game. I know I have a couple more, so I'll go quick. So I'm gonna go with Hampton Campbell. Let's go with the CAA. Last week I talked about a CAA matchup, or last time we were on, I talked about CAA matchup between Maine and Villanova. How big? Or sorry, not Maine, Rhode Island. Talking about Rhode Island's playoff hopes. Hampton is a team that's sneaking under the radar. Last week, Hampton beat Richmond for the first time in I think 7 tries, and if you follow, I guess, FCS football or football in the state of Virginia, you know that the perception, you know that Richmond is or was an FCS power. And the perception of, I wouldn't say a little brother, but like Hampton really kind of was in the shadow of Richmond. It wasn't a big shadow because those programs didn't really play much, but Hampton beat Richmond for the first time, 31-14. And this is a chance for another statement win in the CAA for Campbell. And right now the CAA is open, or for Hampton playing against Campbell. The CAA is wide open right now. There is a lot of questions as to who's going to get at large bids in that conference because the conference favorites like New Hampshire and Rhode Island have faltered, and even Villanova. Villanova got dropped by 21 points against UAlbany. So if Hampton can win a few games, of course their non-conference loss to Norfolk State hurts them, but if they can win a few games in conference, especially the William and Mary game and the Elon game, then you're looking at a team that if they only lose to Delaware down the stretch, this is a 9-2 team with a loss to Delaware and Norfolk State that would be deserving of an at-large playoff bid. And I'm gonna keep talking about running backs. Elijah Burris for the Pirates is a stick of dynamite to say the least. 8 yards per carry on 49 carries. He had an electrifying 93-yard touchdown run against Howard Bison in that come from behind victory. So just a running back to watch there. Sticking with running backs, we got Sam Martin of UT Martin, who is honestly a Walter Payton Award dark horse if we're being honest. I might have typed the name wrong, just typing because it's UT Martin, but let me check. It is Sam Martin, I believe. Uh, got to check again. Jeez, that's why I shouldn't record early in the morning. But yeah, Sam Martin of UT. Sorry, Sam Franklin. Yeah, Sam Franklin of UT Martin has 785 yards and six touchdowns so far this season in 5 games. That's over 150 yards per game. And I think he has the potential to reach close to 2,000 yards. And if you look at the Walter Payton race, a running back hasn't won the Walter Payton Award since I think 2003. If you look at the race for Walter Payton, like Matthew Sluka looked like a front runner with how great he's looked for Holy Cross. The Holy Cross hype train was just on, just rolling along, especially after they almost beat Boston College. But Sluka's hurt by his loss against Harvard for sure. And then you look at South Dakota State. South Dakota State has Isaiah Davis, a guy that you're high on. So this definitely could be a year of the running back. So Sam Franklin at UT Martin are 4-1, Eastern Illinois is 4-1, and this could end up deciding the Big South OVC Conference Championship. And last year, Jackson, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there was a tie in the Ohio Valley Conference standings. And do you know what the tiebreaker was for the playoffs?
I do not. I
It
do
was a
not.
coin flip. It was a coin flip. So
It was a coin flip.
a coin flip kept UT Martin out of the FCS playoffs, which is an absolute travesty because they went 7-4 last year and they went 5-1 in the conference. So that kept and I don't think they didn't play Southeast Missouri State, the eventual playoff team or championship team. So it was a very sticky situation. But Sam Franklin, I'm gonna say it right now. I think Sam Franklin wins the Walter Payton Award.
So was this coin flip? Because this is the first time hearing of it, so I have some questions. Was this like 2017 Vikings Colts to determine the draft order coin flip, where it was an entire event, or was it like just sort of a casual? Was it casual? Like how did this go down?
Far as I know, it wasn't broadcasted anywhere, and I think it just happened in the league's offices or something. I like it. It was not a good look for the league, to say the
Yeah,
least.
no, that's not a good look at all. So you didn't. That's something you have to play into because you could pretty easily garner a good amount of attention. And there's no other because there's a whole list of tie breaking procedures for the NFL playoffs at least, and a coin flip is on there as the last resort. But there's like 50 things you have to get through. Like all those were, or do you even keep track of those lower mostly irrelevant stats at that level? Like what was going on?
It says it said last year if a coin flip is necessary, it will take place on Saturday evening after both games are completed. The flip will be witnessed by individuals of both schools, recorded and also live streamed on Twitter via OVC Sports. So now I gotta find this coin. So I didn't
Yeah,
think it
we
was
need to
live
find
streamed.
this live stream. So
Yeah, it was determined by a coin flip because with conference realignment, both teams were 5-0, and I forget which team left the conference early. I think it might let's see, it might have been Jacksonville State or no, I think it might have been Austin P that left the conference, leaving a hole in the schedule that they just couldn't fill up with conference games. So yeah, just a very weird situation. But yeah, Sam
oh,
Franklin this year, I think he wins the Walter Payton Award, not to take away from Sam Franklin.
man, that's wow. Never knew that. Learn something new every day. So man, that's it for me. Any more games of the week to watch or anything you want to have before we hop off?
Yeah, I just want to mention briefly the Patriot League. I'm a huge Patriot League and Ivy League homer. We got Lafayette versus Princeton. Lafayette's 4-1. This is a huge game if Lafayette even wants to have a chance at at-large bid. Should they lose to Holy Cross? Just going to bench that really quick. And also shout out to the Georgetown Hoyas. Georgetown beat Fordham last week. Fordham, a team that was receiving plenty of votes in the FCS poll. Georgetown has long been the laughing stock of the Patriot League. I don't think they'll make the playoffs this year, but this is a team that once Holy Cross's core graduates, or God forbid, Coach Chesney leaves, which he probably will soon for being real, that Georgetown could be up next in the Patriot League. They play Penn this week. They have never beaten Penn in 7 meetings in a series that stretches back to 1893. So that'll be interesting to see. Hopefully they pull that one off against the Penn Quakers. But just a couple brief notes to watch out for if you're an East Coast fanboy like me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, that's it for me. We'll go ahead, we'll hop off. We're probably going to publish this like immediately. So, probably the closest, if you're listening to this as soon as it comes out, it's probably going to be the closest you'll get to live until we can resume, until we both have the time to resume Bowls and Booze on Monday nights. So, um, yeah, man, but that's it. Fun. Looking forward to another great week of college football. I unfortunately have a pretty hefty schedule on Saturday, but sometime soon we'll not be working weekends hardly at all, hopefully. So,
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, like I said, no, starting out Bulls and Booze, got my bowl projections going on. Love writing about that. But until next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul.